All right. And I would like to warmly welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for joining in this afternoon for our Dare to Do Mindfulness Challenge event. We are so excited to be kicking off our Dare to Do 22 challenge. It is a thrill and an honor to be able to hold this space.
Yeah, I know. I think, yeah, you have.
Go ahead and meet.
Yeah, it's.
Apologies for that. And it's such an honor to be able to have you all here. And I'm so excited to be to have Danny Arguetty with the UW Mindfulness program here leading our session today. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn things over to you, Danny. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry, Danny, you're on mute. Let me unmute you.
Thank you. All right, so welcome everyone. Happy 2022. Glad you're all here, and hope you're doing well today. So just a couple of Zoom logistics. You probably know a lot of this, but all of you are muted, so that's great. You can always unmute yourself for questions or drop things in the chat. And on your screen, if you don't know, you can also, when I'm sharing slides, there's a little bar in the middle that you can adjust if you want to see the group, and just change the size of the slides as well. Let's see, if you are willing to have cameras on at any point, particularly when we're not doing more of an interactive thing, that would be awesome for me. It's just more lovely to not talk to blank boxes. But obviously respect if your camera's off is something that works better for you. We also will do a few breakouts, and you will need something to write with today. So whether that's digital writing or pen and paper, we will be doing some reflection and yeah, just thinking about a few things. So to start out, let's begin with just a little bit of grounding. So to arrive into the space. So if you're in a seated position, adjust your feet on the ground if that's available. Hip width distance apart. Lengthen through your spinal column. You can also do this in standing if you need a break from the seated pose. Relax your arms by the side of your body. Make any little fidgets or movements with your shoulders, head, neck, mouth, jaw. And from there, settle in and let your eyelids drop and soften partway or completely closed. Take a moment here to honor the space that you're in. So if you are in a place where there is loud noises or bright lights or human distractions, other distractions, see if you can allow that to be a part of your experience, inviting those things to be just a tad more into the background. And from there, we'll engage in a very short practice of just taking 3 conscious breaths. So inhale breath, either through your nose or your mouth, full deep breath into your body. With the exhalation, invite physical tension to melt away, letting go of any holding from your mouth, jaw, shoulders. And again here, second breath, inhale fully through nose or mouth. With your exhalation this time, inviting any mental turbulence, busyness to ease. Doesn't mean it might be fully gone, just inviting a little bit more space. And one final time, take a deep, full breath in. This time as you exhale it out, welcoming and holding space for your emotions, however you're showing up today. More joyful, less joyful, neutral. And in that space, take a little pause here. Take note of how you're doing in this moment. And then from there, gently let the eyes return back into the space. Make any little movements that you need, returning back. Okay, So we'll dive on in. So in case you've never met me before, I didn't really do a full introduction, but I work at the recreation department. I manage our yoga and meditation offerings, lead our yoga teacher trainings, and also teach an academic course each quarter on the Be Real curriculum that some of you may have heard of. And this is super fun. I'm glad that I get to interact with all of you today. So if you've ever heard me talk about mindfulness before, some of this might be a review, but we will be also talking a lot about behavioral change science and how to move the needle forward as well. So I always like to start anything that I do with the concept of inquiry. And also these slides will be shared with you over email in case you want a copy of them as well. So most important thing is please don't believe anything that I tell you. And the reason for that is that I'd rather you gather data and run experiments from your own life. And this is so you can create buy-in from your personal experience. I've been working with mindfulness for over 20 years. It works for me. The data keeps on coming back as positive, but it might, the same practices might not work for you. So just remember that. Welcome discomfort and embrace the unfamiliar. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the context of behavioral change because it's very relevant to that. But in any sort of experiment, especially if something is new to you, right, it might be uncomfortable at first, or it might feel, you might just feel a lot of discomfort, or it might be new, right? But the invitation with inquiry practices is to be curious as to what might be on the other side of that discomfort, right? So if something is moving from discomfort to pain or danger and threatening your safety at a very primal level, we don't want that. But sometimes the brain reacts in that same way, where just a little bit of discomfort hits the fire alarm, but we could actually work through that and see what's on the other side. Recognizing how 1 degree shift can change everything. So again, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but basically I don't sail sailboats, sadly. Does anyone sail sailboats? Give me a little emoji if you're a sailor. Oh, nice. Saw a hand up. Fun. So I'm not an expert. Jim, maybe you can chime in on it, but with sailboats, basically, if you turn the rudder of a boat just 1 degree, over time, you'll end up in a really different place. So this is the same idea here, that just a little bit of shift can actually be a huge amount of difference. And we'll talk more about that. And then finally, with inquiry, just this idea of measuring it basically like a science experiment. Is it working or is it not? Is it giving you vitality? Is it supporting your life experience or is it not? And then you can make decisions based off of that. So as opposed to good, bad, right, wrong, I find this to be a little bit more interesting. Okay, let's talk about mindfulness. And again, for some of you, this might be a review. So just honoring the roots of where this practice comes from. So just important to acknowledge that it comes from spiritual traditions of Eastern religions, mostly Hinduism and Buddhism, but it's found in lots of other religious traditions as well. And in the West, we know it, and it's popularized most by yoga, mindfulness-based stress reduction, things like insight meditation and vipassana meditation. And psychology uses a lot of mindfulness as well. And we have a lovely modality, dialectical behavioral therapy, which was developed at UW. It's very similar to cognitive behavioral therapy with a mindfulness spin. So a lot of places that we see mindfulness, and of course, in organizations and workplaces, it's becoming a bigger thing. So let's talk just a little bit about what is mindfulness. So these are just a few definitions. You might have your own as well. But in general, practices that increase attention span, amplify focus, build resiliency to stress, and promote empathy is a short way of thinking about it. And all pretty decent things, right? I think they're pretty lovely, that just a little bit of practice can help this out. Another one of my favorite definitions, waking up, being fully alive, and being present for the richness of each moment. And I think this points to the fact that mindfulness is not just about putting the happy face on. So it also embraces challenge and really welcomes richness in those difficult moments of life as well, that we can grow and learn from those. If you're more of a visual learner, this is the quick summary of what mindfulness is, this ability to respond more and react less. So they use this with elementary school kids, which I think is super lovely that they're already educating them on these concepts. So something's going to happen to you that's inevitable, right? Life throws things. Then sometimes we get frazzled in that process. Number 3 is really the key piece. If we can stop and create more space, notice what's going on, right? Then we can open up the pathways to what we decide to do next. I love that they also have this little number 4, see your best self. And then what are your tools? What are the strategies that you're going to use? And then hopefully we succeed. With the success part, I just want to be clear that with these practices, there isn't an expectation for 100% success. Again, I told you I've been doing this for a while. I still make mistakes, believe it or not. I still get angry sometimes. I still say things, put my foot in my mouth. I say things that are not so lovely at times, but then hopefully, I recognize that and I say sorry and I clean up the mess that I created. But probability wise, I have gotten better over the years. So definitely that does help. Okay, so before we go to brain science of mindfulness, any questions, thoughts, anything else that you want to say about what mindfulness is, or yeah, to you? All right, so let's move on to a little bit of brain science. We won't spend a whole lot of time here, but I think this is just important to touch upon. Mindfulness works really well according to science. And again, I'm biased, but and I think it's cool that there's actually brain structures that get shifted in this process. So the good news is that these don't have to be really super long practices. If you have 30 minutes for a meditation, an hour for a yoga class, that's lovely. But you don't need to have that much time. So even 3 to 5 minutes can be super impactful to start working on these structures of the brain. And again, you can see, I won't read all of it in detail, but more self-regulation in these parts of the brain, better for improved learning and memory, which is also a lovely thing. More activation in a part of the brain called the insula, which helps us with awareness and also working with our feelings and cognition, action. Reduced activity in the amygdala. This is a big one. You may have heard of the amygdala before. So this is really where our fight or flight center often gets triggered from. So when people that are navigating a lot of chronic depression or anxiety tend to have a more active amygdala. So we can calm amygdala down with these practices to help that process. And then final 2 things here. So we see more thickness in the prefrontal cortex with mindfulness practices. And this is sometimes known as executive functions, or in evolution, this is over here is our little primal brain, where that's where fight or flight gets activated. So prefrontal cortex allows us to better talk to this animal brain, reptilian brain of ours, to be able to intervene and not react as often to stress. And then this last one just did a very big meta-analysis around how mindfulness is beneficial. And these are the top 3 things that really bubbled up to the surface. So more increased self-awareness, more attentional control, and a greater ability to regulate our emotions. So again, I'm biased, but I think pretty cool things that the brain can shift in that way with just a little bit of practice. Yeah, so Diane asked, is there a minimum amount of time needed for benefits? Minutes a day, days a week, of course, more is better, but what is going to start? Yeah, good. So even again, like I said, 3 to 5 minutes can be beneficial. And the good news is that you can think about it like it doesn't have to even be in one segment, right? So even let's say you wake up in the morning and are going to use sipping your cup of tea as a mindfulness practice. So that's like 3 minutes there, right? Walking to the bus or to the link, or taking a morning walk before you're working at home. That could be another short practice. So you can think of what are ways that you can give you time to brainstorm on this more, but there's ways that you can weave this into the fabric of your day so it doesn't become another to-do list and create more stress. As far as how many days a week, hold on to that because we'll talk about it in the context of like goal setting, and there's a nice little thing around that will relate back to this. Any questions on this part? Okay, so let's talk about the conduits for increased awareness or mindfulness. And we'll have just short experience with some of these. Usually I spend longer on this, but I want to make sure we have time for the other topic matter at hand. So the main conduits that I work with and really mindfulness works with is accessing self-awareness through the physical body, through our breath, and also through the mind and emotions. This one's a very big ball of wax that takes a lot of time, but takes a lot of time to flush out, but really the practices don't take a lot of time. So what people notice is that when they engage with these three conduits, and this does not mean that these are like perfect and clean and clear, and it just means we're just doing some sort of practice with some of these, that there's more intuition that surfaces, and there's just a greater feeling of connection and belonging, which occurs as a result. So maybe that means, you know, more connected to yourself or to your family or colleagues or just organization. So it can happen in multiple ways that way. Okay, so let's pause that for a moment. And let's have just a little bit of an experience. We'll work with a little bit of movement and then just a little bit of working with the breath as well. So again, you can do this from a seated position. I'll be guiding from standing, but know that you can adapt this as well into a seat. So start out with your feet hip distance, somewhere comfortable, whether you're sitting or standing. And again, making any little fidgets, movements just to arrive into the space. And take a moment here, soften through your eyes. So we soften the eyes partly to invite more introspection, to soften the outer environment and be able to better take inventory of what's going on the inner realms. So in this little pause, take inventory and notice, particularly in your physical body, are you aware of any areas that are more tense or fatigued? You can also acknowledge the parts of your body that feel more energized and spacious. And then from that place, return light back into your eyes, extend your right arm out in front, take your left hand into a fist, and start to tap the outside and then the inside of your arm. Outside and inside of your arm. And switch, extend your opposite arm, tap here. This is a way just to make contact with the body and give a little refresh for any tension that's going on. It's also a mind practice. So it's a way to focus your attention. So if your mind is super busy, distracted, see if you can bring yourself back to the tactile connection of your body. From there, take both of your fists and bring your hands to your hips, a little tap at the hips. From there, low back tap. Belly tap. And then go higher up to your collarbones, upper chest area. And if you are in a space where you can make a little bit of noise, this is not just to be silly, but to let go of tension. Take a deep breath in, then let it go with a little From there, take the knuckles up to the top of your shoulders. Some people find it easier to cross the arms here, so check in with what works best. Let your eyes again soften. Here, partway or fully closed. Tip your chin to the sky, move into little softer finger pad taps at the front of your throat. Then the chin. go to the side of the mouth, above the mouth, wider out to your jaw, cheekbones, ears, temples, side of your head, then the back of your head. Oh, and the forehead, let's not forget the forehead. From the back of your head again, walk down to your neck. Little tapping there. And then rise back up to the top of your head here. Circle the top of your head for 3, 2, 1. Gradually release, slide your arms by the side of your body, eyes soft. Take a deep, deep breath in. Exhale it out. And again, return to that moment of pause, notice, reflect. What are you feeling here? Anything that you're aware of? Tingling, sensation, circulation, added heat? You might be aware of release of tension, or there could be actually awareness of more tension. Sometimes these practices bring about the areas that are actually tense, but we weren't aware of them. And with the eyes here still staying soft, take one hand to your belly center, one hand to your heart center. And moving into another practice here to simply notice the way that the breath is moving in and out of your body. So tuning in to these gentle waves of breath flowing in and out. Use the contact with your body to be able to better feel the motion. What happens when air moves into your lungs? Do you notice any motion in your belly or ribs? Any other part of your body? Then also what happens on that exhalation? How are things shifting? If your mind has bounced off somewhere else, see if you can invite it back to physical contact, and then that awareness of breath moving through you like gentle waves. From there, gently relax your arms by the side of your body, taking notice of the effects of just tuning into the breath. Super simple, but can actually be pretty potent. And then from there, return yourself back into the space. Okay, so anyone willing in the chat, or you can also unmute, but just even if it's one word of anything that you're noticing now and how you're feeling, ease, more tension, more connected to your breath, less connected. So anything that you're noticed as an effect from just those few motions, and then observing the rhythm of the breath. So we have tingles from tapping, more relaxed, and just a cooling sensation, lighter. Let's see, less tension in neck and shoulders, calmer, less tension, quiet, refreshed, calm, more body awareness, strangely relieving, less tension, better, calmer, more aware, whole body tingle, calmness. Awesome, more things are coming in the chat. You can look at that as well. Swaying while standing. Yeah, great. So again, if this didn't feel amazing, know that that's not the requirement. Again, sometimes you might feel more tension, but this is it. So this is just the simple engagement of mindfulness practices, and we're building that muscle of just doing something with fuller attention, taking that pause to also notice, and that can come in, it will come in useful everywhere. And also when we send you the follow-up email with slides, also share with you a link to recorded videos guided of these practices and more if that ends up being one of your inquiries that you want to explore some of these movement breaks or stress breaks throughout the day. They can be a great way to reboot and reset. Okay, let's go back to slide land. One moment. Come on. Okay. So back to the slides. So let's talk a little bit about behavior change, because this can sometimes be the hard part of wanting to live a more mindful and healthier life all around. So we'll start with a very short video around how building on how the brain works, particularly with habit building. So you may have heard this term before. If you haven't, it's one of my favorite: neurons that fire together, wire together. And it relates to habit building. So I have shared my sound on the computer. When it starts, depending on your volume, it might be really loud. So just know that you can modulate it on your end.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
All right, so I think for me, this is just really inspiring in the way that it's never too late. You can always make those changes. And again, we'll loop back, but to that original question, consistency is going to be a part of this as to how we strengthen those neural pathways. So let's look at this. I kind of talked about this a little bit before, but you're probably aware of this, but at the end of the day, human beings are lovely and evolved, but we do have that reptilian brain as part of our architecture, right? So if you boil us down to our animal self, we really are creatures that crave pleasure, comfort. Oops, that should not be risk, and that should be safety. Typo. So we are craving pleasure, comfort, and safety, and then we try to move away from pain, discomfort, and risk. That's just how we tend to function. But this is where what I was talking about before with mindfulness, we can recognize that distinction of, okay, is it just, so for example, earlier, this is super boiled down and simple, but earlier this morning, I was sitting in my desk, and I'm pretty good at, I alternate between standing and sitting. And it was a little bit of time of sitting, and then I had a little voice in my brain chime in and says, okay, it's been a little bit of time of sitting. It's time for you to stand up. And of course, it was not like, okay, yay, I'm jumping up to stand up at my desk, right? Like the next voice that came to my head was, oh, but I'm so comfortable here. And I don't know, like, do I really want to stand up, right? So, I mean, that's that animal brain of like, oh, I'm comfortable, I'm cozy. But then luckily, I know how my process works. So I'm like, thanks for sharing, animal brain. We're going to stand up now, because that's the thing that I know in the long run will make my body feel better. So that's how, but if I don't have that pause or that ability to self-reflect, right, then it's going to be a lot harder to be able to push back against some of those inner voices and make the more life-enhancing choice that I know is going to support me for the long run. So important to recognize, when you're moving towards one end of this spectrum or not. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about willpower, because sometimes in pop culture that comes up, and you may already know, I hope you've heard the latest stuff on willpower, and that is terrible. So it's really just not effective for the long run, right? So like to muscle through the whole thing of like no pain, no gain, it's just does not yield wonderful results. So how do we reframe willpower to really support us? Well, it's going to be these other factors. Self-awareness is going to be a huge one. That's what mindfulness really brings to the table. Compassion, also something focused on in mindfulness, right? It's this balance of I can have accountability for myself, but also have compassion. But really, and then really the biggest part is the environment, right? So it's just like, what are things in your environment that you can do to really move yourself towards a goal that you're wanting to work with. So you're all very smart people. So I'm curious, what if anyone's willing to chime in, just like what's an example of using the environment to support a behavioral change? What would you say? Oh, thank you. Environment is misspelled. Very sad. Thank you for letting me know. That's good. So we have taking a walk outside, don't buy foods that are not good for me. Yeah, having a standing desk, right, as a reminder. Pick a place you enjoy, putting your phone out of reach in the evening. Yeah, I love that. Putting your alarm clock across the room, decluttering your space, adding a standing desk option, prepping healthy meals, lots of standing desk, love that. Have a place set aside for meditation, yes, more likely to use it. Choose pleasant surroundings, love that, yeah. Keeping fruit nearby, make positive habits. It was sunny yesterday, I went for a walk, right? So motivation that way. A small object in your visual field. Intentionally planning movement breaks throughout your day, right? So putting that in your calendar, let's say, as reminders. Yeah, these are all great. The power of group brain. Awesome, thank you. I will make updates to these slides before you get them. All right, so yes, how do we work with all of those? So stages of change, again, you may have heard about this before, but I think it's just good to have this in the awareness of how we tend to work around shifting. And so it might be that especially around the new year, a lot of people are in contemplation phase of like, oh, I want to make these shifts. So then preparing to take that action, and then actually having a concrete action plan that one is taking. Then we get to the maintenance phase of that. And this is usually where people tend to drop off, right? So this is where New Year resolutions fail and people return to the old ways. And again, we'll talk about some better ways to work with that. And then termination, just when you're no longer tempted to return to the old ways, it's kind of like, if you're thinking about it in relationship to those neural pathways, we can think of termination as like, all right, the habit is pretty strongly laid, and then it doesn't take as much effort to actually engage in that. So, again, just as another example, like for me, movement is one of the things that I definitely, I correlate it with my mental health. I get very clear feedback. If I don't move my body, it impacts my mood. So these days, although I don't write out and plan, you know, like this day, I don't pre-plan, like this day I'm going to do this day I'm going to do this day I'm going to do that. But I do know that in a 7-day week, it's a pretty much a guarantee that 4 days out of that week, I will be moving my body in some sort of dedicated way. And it consistently happens. So, but there's lots of other things where I do like write it down and need that motivation to, you know, keep the maintenance part of it. Okay, so let's bring this all together, and this is a resource that you can use. We'll take just a little bit of time here just to even start this out, or if you already have a goal set that you're working with. But this is just, I think, a great way to work with this, to really be prepared, because it's one thing to have a goal and, you know, and plan the action for it. But I think this part is really, really beneficial, limiting beliefs, right? So it's like, this is the introspection part of thinking about, all right, well, I want to do more movement on a weekly basis. Well, what might be some internal voices, internal blocks, limiting beliefs that are coming up for you? And then if then planning, it's kind of like contingency plans, right? So it's like, all right, well, if I've committed to do 45 minutes of movement on a particular day, and you know, someone asks me to go for tea or coffee, or you know, what might, you all know your lives better than I do, right? So it's like, what are some things that might come up that might entice you to actually say like, oh, I'm not going to do that today. So I think when we can prepare for those potential obstacles, then, you know, you can value it better. What kind of priority is this? Or, all right, I'm going to say that I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to stick to the commitment that I made. And then the self-monitoring part is really this piece. It brings back the awareness part of being able to check in with yourself. Or I would also add to this, like group monitoring, right? So I think buddy systems really work well to be able to get support from other people, and accountability. So it's not just for yourself. But you can also, there's a lot of self-accountability that we do. When I'm trying to cultivate a new habit, I'll often print out a little calendar for myself, and like, I just like things on paper, and I'll write my commitment on that calendar, like 4 times a week or 3 times a week I'm doing, you know, this form of meditation, and then I'll check off the days that I've actually done that. So that helps me with the self-monitoring. Does this make sense as a way to approach? Any questions or further thoughts on this? Okay, so let's take just a few minutes. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier on, but we're going to finish around 10 till the hour, just so in case you have something else on your schedule, you have a little bit of time just to transition and not be rushed. So I do want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A as well, and there's one more final piece to go over. Actually, let's go over that now because it's related to goal setting. So this is what I was talking about before. So around goal setting, really important just to keep it simple, right? Often, especially in the new year, people are like, I'm going to do these 1,000 things and change, you know, so many things in my life. And then it just ends up not being successful. So, you know, 1 or 2 inquiry commitments max. And then of course, I'm sure you've all heard of SMART goals. So being clear, right? I am going to do a 5-minute meditation, you know, in the morning before I go to work, 3 days out of the week. For the next, so I want to be again clear about my boundary, for the next 2 months, right? For the next 3 months, for the next 2 weeks. So whatever it is, but just being very clear and measurable. It takes about 3 months, so around 66 days 2-3 months to create a new habit where it's really churning well in that neural network sort of way. So sadly, the whole pop culture of 21 days, it's a good start, but I'd rather you focus more on like long-term consistency. And then this is what I was talking or was alluding to earlier on with the question of, you know, how often do I need to do this? Well, it's called the 51% rule. And the way that it works is that if you do something 51% of the time, you're actually building the neural pathways. So really, you know, in a week time frame, that means if you're doing some sort of practice, right, 3.5, 4 days a week, then and it doesn't have to be, it could be a 5-minute practice each day, or, you know, 2 5-minute practices each day. That's going to help build and strengthen the muscle of mindfulness. Does that make sense? I think this is really good news, especially I always use kale as an example because it's just not one of my favorite foods. But I just, you know, think about like, oh, if I consume these greens like 51% of the time, I'll still get the benefit. But I try to add yummy things to kale to make it a little better. Sorry if you're a kale lover and you like it just plain. Okay, let's go back to, oh, can we go back? One second. Let's go back to this slide. Oh, that does not work. I shared the wrong thing with you. Come on. All right, there we go. So let's just take a moment here. So think about something that you're working with, and you might not have time for this whole process, but even if you do like one strand of what's a goal that you have, are there any limiting beliefs around it? What are some obstacles that might come up in the way of you actually accomplishing that? And again, if you have, you might ask, what is the solution to that? But even just identifying the obstacle can be beneficial. And then self-monitoring. So what is the way, you know, or accountability? What is the way that you'll keep yourself accountable for this? And Robert shared about making kale saag paneer. It's delicious. That sounds really yummy. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So just take like 30 more seconds, super brief.